Welcome to Digital Democracy on Tap. I'm Sarah Jane Crespo. So this year's holiday season is going to feel a bit different. Families are encouraged not to gather in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Tonight, we're going to discuss coping with social isolation this holiday season. We have on the panel tonight Eric Litwiller from the Mental Health Association of South Central Kansas, Ashlyn Riley from the Wichita State University Campus Assessment Response Evaluation Team. We'll call it WSU's CARE team. Also joining us is Dr. Michelle Vann from Vanntastic Solutions, and we have Hilary Trudo, a social work program specialist for USD 259. Over the next hour, we welcome your questions through Facebook comments, or you can email us right now at info@kmuw.org. Let's get started. Living with COVID-19 is something we're all growing accustomed to at this point, but it feels like adding insult to injury on top of the holiday season. Eric, can you help us set the stage and tell us what we're seeing at the what you're seeing at the Mental Health Association as far as the impact of social isolation over the past 9 months prior to the holiday season?
Yeah, a lot of what we're seeing over the course of the pandemic has been, well, there's a couple different things we're seeing. One of them is, I think, that people who previously received treatment through either MHA or another mental health organization and maybe got away, they felt like things were getting better. They kind of moved on. This pandemic kind of put them back in a place where, okay, I was equipped before, but now this is a whole new thing. So people are starting to come back and kind of getting a refresher, figuring out how to handle this new dynamic. Another thing we're seeing is people who maybe, anxiety and depression are already by far the two most common mental health issues. And so they kind of were dealing with it on their own before, maybe not always in the healthiest of ways, but they were finding ways to make it work short term. And this pandemic kind of just was the straw that broke the camel's back. And now we're making them realize those behaviors I was using before, we now know they're not appropriate, they're not healthy. So now I'm going to go and actually get official treatment. And then the third thing we're seeing, and we're seeing less of it because of the nature of it, but we're finding a lot of people who were using those unhealthy short-term coping skills and now have taken advantage of the pandemic to kind of double down on those. If this worked before, now I'm just going to double up on it and it'll continue to work. So they're not coming in because essentially they're doubling down on these unhealthy short-term coping mechanisms to get them through this difficult time. Things like drugs, alcohol, self-harm, eating disorders, we know they're happening. They're using those behaviors as a way of dealing with the stress and the anxiety. So we know what's happening. Those people just have not started coming in yet to get the help that they need.
So this has been kind of a trigger for people to kind of go one of two different directions, either doubling down or maybe shifting into different behaviors. But then you add into it the holidays. How does that further mix the situation up?
Yeah, the holidays are just going to exacerbate the situation because I think a lot of people felt like, a lot of us assumed that by the holidays this would be done. We would all be back together. And so people were kind of viewing that as the light at the end of the tunnel. And now suddenly that light is kind of being switched off, for lack of a better term. And that's always a difficult time for people to realize they were just on the cusp of being okay again. And now they can't even see their family. But at the same time, it's also creating a lot of opportunities to get very creative. And we've seen people who've said things like, who says we have to get together and open presents in December? Why can't it be next June? Or renting out airplane hangars and opening all the doors to get cross ventilation. Thanksgiving was beautiful. I saw people doing that. So people are finding creative ways of dealing with it, but to have that sudden switch off of the light at the end of the tunnel when they were expecting the holidays to be available to them has been difficult. And it's really exacerbated that anxiety and the depression that we tend to see every day anyway, just making it worse.
Thank you, Eric. Let's turn to Ashlyn to find out how any of this might differ among college students. What are you seeing, Ashlyn?
Yeah, so this year has been a really tough one. We've seen a lot of increased anxiety, increased depression, and especially social isolation. That's been a real difficult theme for a lot of our college students. People aren't able to engage in the events on campus like they used to. I know we've been experiencing a lot of students just struggling with the transition of online learning, of it not being your traditional college experience, which I think has really, sometimes it's those little things that COVID has really brought to our attention, like the importance of having a traditional college experience and really getting that feel like you're exploring your goals and your options. And so with the events closing, with organizations and groups on campus not being able to meet in person due to COVID, it's been really difficult. We've also seen a lot of Zoom fatigue. I think we can all kind of relate to that on some level. Students are utilizing Zoom a lot for their online learning. And it's been a great tool and it's been very helpful. But, you know, we have different students at various different levels. And for some, online learning can be just a huge challenge, which just, you know, as Eric said, exacerbates the issue of some of those mental health concerns. We have seen a bit of an uptick with students in crisis financially as well, related to the pandemic, whether that's affecting them personally with their job or whether that's affecting, you know, family, relatives that might be supporting them through the college process. And, you know, we haven't seen some increase SI, that's suicidal ideation, you know, not being able to see friends, not being able to go home maybe for the holidays, and just not being able to participate in such a important time in their lives, right? They're young, they're full of energy, they want to go out, try new things, find new experiences, and they're just really struggling with that right now. But I will say the university, we've been really trying to create different, you know, like Eric said, we all have to be creative, right? And so we've been trying to really think outside of the box on how best to support students, how can we get them those resources, how can we support their mental health and help keep them engaged the best that we can.
I really did want to ask you about that. Like, what is WSU doing to support students? Everyone's kind of being creative and innovating right now. What is WSU trying to do to help with the mental health of the students?
Well, one of the biggest supporters that we have is our CAPS counseling service. For anybody that's a WSU student or prospective student, they can go to our CAPS Counseling Center. You can look up information at wichita.edu and you can just search CAPS. But students can go and they can talk to a licensed therapist. They can get mental health resources both on campus and in the community. We also have our care team, which I'm a part of. I'm a coordinator for. And kind of what we do is if we have students living on campus or off campus, we will connect them with resources such as United Way. ComCare Crisis is a big one that we partner with to make sure that our students are supported, especially over the breaks. Students who have not been able to go home, we make sure that they do have kind of welfare checks that are in there for them just to help them feel more supportive. You know, and we've also been trying to come up with different events and fund different things to help students kind of stay engaged. We've got self-care Sundays that we've been doing about once a month on a Sunday. We try to open it up to students and do a, you know, guided meditation or maybe a yoga session, or even just listening to music and coloring and having it be a safe place for people to talk. So, you know, WSU is trying, we're also making sure, of course, for those students that are here on campus and things that are in person, just making sure that those common heavily trafficked areas are cleaned, people are wearing masks, and just really promoting that staying safe, both mentally and physically as well.
So let's take the conversation to younger students still. Hilary, how are K through 12 students holding up with remote learning or the mix of in-person and remote? There is certainly a lot of change for them as well.
Absolutely, there has been. So as you may know, our secondary students, our middle and high school students have been learning remotely for the entire school year. And then just at the beginning of this month, our elementary students moved to remote learning as well. So there have been quite a few adjustments throughout this year, and we are seeing the impact that that's having on students, of all ages. We're also seeing some really great things, the creativity that teachers have, the opportunities that come about for students to interact, some of the breakout rooms that they can go to during some of their classroom sessions. They can have some of that small group work still. It's not in person. I'm not sitting right next to you, but we are having this conversation and working on this project collaboratively in a different type of way. Our younger kids are able to do the same types of things. They can meet individually with each other, or not with each other, but in their small groups. They can meet individually, maybe with a school counselor or other support staff, if they need a few minutes, or some students like that regular check-in. So we are seeing just the different ways that we can continue to connect with our students in this virtual way.
Do you think this is going to have long-term effects with, say, the cognitive development and forming relationships with peers for the individuals at kind of formative times right now?
That's a really good question. I think, of course, this is going to have an impact on all of our students of all ages, especially our younger kids. But at the same time that we talk about the impact that this is going to have, it's not all a negative impact. There are some positive things too. Our kids are learning new ways. They're learning how to cope, and they're learning different ways to interact with each other, whether that's in a school setting or whether they have a FaceTime call or a Zoom gathering with their peers during non-school hours. I've heard of Zoom sleepovers, or hanging out together, making popcorn, making cookies, or all kinds of very creative ways that we can do that. So I think that we have the opportunity to just really capitalize on this with our kids too, that this is different. This is not what we expected. If we give them the opportunity to talk that through and to share their feelings, they might be disappointed, they might be frustrated, they may not understand, but when we give them that time and space to really just process it and talk about that, we can then follow up that conversation with what can we take out of this? What can we learn? What are some of the positive things that we might not have been exposed to if we weren't in this situation?
What are parents of the youngest children doing differently during this time, those in elementary and kindergarten?
Yeah, I think our younger parents they're feeling it. They're certainly feeling it too, especially our working parents who are now juggling, whether they're working at home and then side by side doing school with their kids, and there's just a whole lot more on our parents' plates. So that is definitely something that is happening.
Thank you for helping us to kind of see that school age a picture, and it's an important age group. There is still an important age group that we have yet to talk about. Eric or Michelle, can one of you share how older individuals are handling the social isolation? And Michelle, I'd also like to kind of ask, you have, I think, a broader vantage point. You wear a lot of different hats and serve different communities. What you're seeing. How about you go first, Michelle?
So I would say that what I'm seeing is that we have a lot of people who, I think has been brought up before, have had to be creative, have had to learn. So as a secretary of Ministerial League, one of the things that I had to do was I had to teach a lot of pastors who barely knew how to use their phone, how to use Zoom. And so that's been a huge learning curve of just trying to teach people how to use the technology, first of all. and make them know that, you're not going to break it. If you get off, you can get back on. And so I think that's been the big piece with our older clientele or our older constituents in our community, is getting them to understand the technology, to comfortable using the technology, knowing that this is the way, this is what's going to happen if you want to have conversation. I would say also having conversations with moms. So there is a piece in my coaching where I deal a lot with moms and looking at how do we build confidence, and their confidence is shaken because there is a lot of people that are losing their jobs. There are a lot of people that, working remotely is not an option for them. And so what am I supposed to do with my children when they're now at home? And what does that look like? And so I think that's really been the biggest thing. And then we have this other piece where I work in the community, and it's that whole piece of people that have never been a part of needing to go to a soup kitchen or a food pantry, that are now having to seek help, that maybe didn't get any pandemic help, or their unemployment has run out, and now they're trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do? I had a man come in the other day, and he had had surgery right at the end of April. Well, he hasn't been able to work the whole time because he had back surgery. And he said, now I'm at the point where I've used up the money that I had, I've used up the things that I've had, and now I need help. And so he said, I never would have seen myself coming here, getting food, but I'm here. And so I think that's the thing, is that we have a lot of people that are in situations that they had never, ever thought that they would be in, needing help, needing support, needing that village that we grew up with. But because times have changed and the village separated and it's not as close, we're trying to scramble to figure out, how do we have somebody to watch our kids? How do we have somebody to really be supportive? And so that village has had to come together really quickly and try to regain some of that comfort and regain some of that trust that had been lost as we had, moved out into the suburbs and moved away from our families as much.
Yeah, it seems there are the psychological hurdles that people have to go through right now are, in some cases, there's maybe not greater than the physical hurdles. And then there's the emotional hurdles. They're just challenges at every possible turn for individuals to get through this pandemic. Eric, what do you think? How are older people handling social isolation as far as your vantage point?
Yeah, it's incredibly tough, I think, on the age group. I tend to refer to them as post-retirement age group. It's always tough on them. There have been studies done demonstrating that the isolation, just normal, not counting the pandemic, just normal isolation that people face as they tend to age, is equivalent to roughly smoking 10 cigarettes a day, both in quantity and quality of life. This happens as families are increasingly mobile. Kids have moved away, grandparents or grandkids are across the country. Maybe I'm in a walker, and so I don't get out as much. My neighbors moved or passed away, and so I don't know the new neighbors because I can't get out and meet with them. So that's one of the reasons our senior companion program here at MHA has always kind of been one of my pets. I've tended to work with the older ages anyway, and so I know what they're going through. And the pandemic, of course, again, has just made the situation increasingly worse. I think maybe really the only bright spot on this, as Michelle just mentioned, is that there is an opportunity to kind of use this as an impetus to introduce that older age group to some technology that can make their lives a little bit easier. Calling the grandkids and doing Zoom cooking lessons or Zoom game nights or Zoom virtual movie nights, whatever it is. That older demographic may not have had a real reason or motivation to utilize those kind of tools before. But with the pandemic, I think that motivation is there now. And I think increasingly more and more people are starting to use those because, quite frankly, if they don't, like I said, the quality and quantity of life is already a challenge. When you added the pandemic to that, I haven't seen, numbers to demonstrate how much worse it's made it, but certainly hasn't helped. And so if this is a reason and the motivation to get introduced to some of those technological options, so much the better.
before we move on to more ways that we can help, for anyone who's just joining us, I'm Sarah Jane Crespo, and this is Digital Democracy on Tap. We're talking about social isolation during this holiday season with Eric Litwiller of the Mental Health Association of South Central Kansas, Ashlyn Riley from the Wichita State University Care Team, Dr. Michelle Vann of Vanntastic Solutions, and Hilary Trudo, a social work specialist for USD 259. You can join the conversation by sending questions on Facebook or emailing info@kmuw.org. Now, I do have an audience question that I want to get to in just a moment, but first let's talk about a couple of things that we can do to help. Michelle, what are some of the most tried and true methods for dealing with the kind of stress that we're talking about this evening?
Well, I think one of the first things is, building our spirituality. I think that there is a piece in which, prayer and meditation and whatever your particular mode of being able to do those things is definitely one of the first pieces. Being able to find those times to exercise and finding different ways to do that. If that's walking the stairs at your house or, finding a way to get out. I encourage people, I do a blog and I encourage people every day. If you can, even if you can't, if it's too cool to go walk or whatever, make sure you get by the window. So make sure you get that light. And then it's making sure that we eat as well as possible. So looking at, maybe I can't get out. We've been talking about the senior population. Maybe I can't go to the grocery store, but it's making sure that I'm ordering those groceries, getting them delivered to my house so that I'm getting good greens, I'm getting good nutrition into my system. And even if I don't eat so well, making sure that I get, some kind of supplement. And I think that's where we get the biggest bang for our buck during this time. When we have, mental instability, a lot of that, when we start to really look at that, some of it comes from nutrition. And so when we can eat well, when we can exercise, when we can keep our routines, and I know that sometimes when we don't leave our house, it's real easy to forget what day it is, to forget, what am I supposed to be doing? What time, we can lose track of time. And so it's really getting those routines, keeping a regular bedtime, making sure that we are keeping those routines really will help us to get through this pandemic.
Go ahead.
If that's okay. I just want to add to that too, Michelle. The same goes for our college students, right? We stress to them, as much as it's fun to work from home or be able to stay in your pajamas while you're doing your homework, we encourage them, get into that daily routine. Wake up, put clothes on, shower, put your makeup on, even if you're not going anywhere. Sometimes those small things can really not only boost your mood, boost your productivity, but also just make you feel good. Something that I'm always stressing to my students is self-care. Staying hydrated, getting enough sleep, eating properly. Those are huge, and they have an effect on both your mental health and your physical health. And I tell a lot of students, use Google if you're like, man, I've read books, I've watched movies, I've done crafts, there's nothing left to do. I challenge you. I'm sure there's something you haven't tried, and Google 101 self-care ideas. You'd be surprised the amount of things that involve, little to no effort to lots of effort, and so you can find them all in between, both inside the house and having fun outside the house safely. So definitely, utilizing that technology, Google search, treat yourself, take care of yourself.
Even in that, looking at, the 101 things, there are things that are within one price range to the next, some things that are totally free and cost you nothing to things that may cost you a subscription or something a little more substantial, but it's looking at how do I do some of those free things? Because I think that's where people really get off is that, I don't have any money or I can't really afford. There are lots of tons and tons and tons of free things, but you have to take the time to look for them.
Hilary, I have a question from someone, I believe, on Facebook here who asks, what kind of support does USD 259 offer for students who are struggling with social isolation? What are some of those specific things that they can offer?
A great idea or a great question. There's counseling staff available, support staff available in each building, even when we're remote. When students aren't physically in the building, there are still staff members working and available to help support students. checking in. They do a good job of checking in, visiting the virtual classrooms, doing observations, being available to discuss with teachers if there are students that the teacher is concerned about. If parents have a concern, they can certainly contact the school and say, hey, you may not have noticed, but we need a little bit of help here. We can provide some of those virtual check-ins or a phone call. Those ways to connect with students. There are lots of, we've done some trainings with our staff of how to make our virtual times with students fun and engaging, different games that we can play, different techniques that we can use. There's lots and lots of digital tools out there.
Are there a couple of those that you would mind sharing?
There are some, I can't think of the names. I could probably do a quick Google search, but there are some interactive games that are available, where like you can play checkers, or I've seen where they, one person, like if I'm on one end, I've got a camera and I'll face it towards the checkerboard, and then you can tell me where you want to move your piece to. We can draw together, whether that's using some fancy technology where we're both interacting on the same screen, or whether we're using that camera and then you tell me, okay, now what are we going to draw? Are we drawing a house? Are we drawing outside? Are we drawing inside? Are we drawing people? Where do I put the hair? Where do I put the eyes? And so kind of some student-led and interactive activities like that.
From Facebook asks, what are the signs someone is in trouble from isolation? Eric, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, so we know that just this year over last year, suicides themselves are up 70% from last year, which is incredibly concerning. A couple things to look out for, really. The overriding theme, I think, of what to look for is just changes in behavior. So look at a person and don't compare them. Take a teenager, for instance. Don't necessarily compare them to their friends, but compare them to where they were 6 months ago or a year ago. And look for drastic changes in them individually. If they're very introverted and their best friend is very extroverted, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your kid. If they're introverted today and last year they were very extroverted, that's where you're noticing a concern. Drastic changes in behavior. Look for things like, are they continuing to get roughly the same grades? I would have said back in the day, are they still going to Friday night football games and dances? But of course, I can't say that right now. But look for, are they still performing, I guess, the normal tasks of daily living, for lack of a better term? Are they still getting up? Are they still, keeping themselves clean? Are they doing the homework as best they can? Are they texting with friends? Are they ignoring you? That may be perfectly normal. I have teenagers. It probably is. So look for drastic changes in behavior, ultimately, is what I'm saying, and look for an ability to continue to care for themselves. Another thing would be, a lot of people, there's this myth out there that if people are talking about suicide or using kind of code words like, I don't know, even though I'm still alive, some people will say, well, they're saying that to get attention. No, that's not probably true. Something like 80% of people do tend to talk about their feelings in advance to friends or to family members. And so don't write it off as them seeking attention, because frankly, if it is them seeking attention, think how bad of a place they must be in to start thinking that that's the best way of getting it. So if you're hearing those code words or hearing people talk like that, take it very seriously, make some phone calls. There are resources out there. Don't write it off as they're just trying to get attention because they're bored or they're frustrated or they can't see their friends. It's something serious. So those are probably the three main things. Look for warning signs, like I said, code words talking about suicide. Look for changes in behavior, and look for ability to continue just normal activities of daily living.
I just want to add to that too, talking about the suicidal ideation. It is a hard conversation and topic to bring up. And so definitely if you feel comfortable bringing that topic up to somebody, don't, feel bad about asking. I know I've also heard that people think that, oh, well, if I say it to them, that's going to plant the idea in their head. And that is not true. So if you feel comfortable asking somebody, hey, I've noticed this, or I heard you say this, are you having thoughts to hurt yourself? Are you feeling suicidal? And if you don't feel comfortable asking that question, that's okay too. Just, like Eric said, knowing that, hey, something's not right. I'm noticing some changes, and getting that person connected, like with our local community crisis center, and just saying, hey, I'm worried about a friend. Maybe they can get some help.
And that's a great way of phrasing it too. A lot of people will say, "You're not thinking about hurting yourself, are you?" Well, when you lead them into that question, you're basically telling them what you already want to hear. So the way that you just phrase it is absolutely perfect. Is this something you're thinking about? Have you had thoughts about? If you lead them in with the question already telling them, I don't really want to hear that you're thinking about this, you're going to guide them to a place you want to hear, and it's not going to do that person any good at all. So think about how you're phrasing those questions.
Yes.
So no leading the witness. And
right, there you go.
Yeah. You would you suggest, if you feel a little uncomfortable about having that conversation with them, you call the service provider and say, I'm concerned about my friend, here's their number. I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, having those kinds of resources available, having those phone numbers at the ready. I hand my business cards out like it's candy. Every time I have a speaking engagement, I want to make sure everyone has our phone number. So be that person who's got the resources at the ready, and don't be afraid to hand it to them. I know I met this guy at a speech, this organization can help. I think that's a great way of handling it. Yeah.
Is that what you were going to say, essentially, Ashlyn?
Yes. And
give the phone number to your friend.
Yeah, you can give the phone number to them. Sometimes if you're not able to get in touch with maybe an individual because they are self-isolating, and you're like, man, I just really haven't heard from them in a couple of days. I'd really like to check in. I encourage people to, reach out to ComCare. You can give them a call at 316-660-7500. It's 24-hour service, and you can say, hey, I'd like a welfare check done on my friend. And they'll take that information, and depending on the day and the time, they'll make sure to give that person a call. You can also kind of specify whether or not you feel like police ought to be involved. Some welfare checks can be more serious than others, depending on the situation and kind of what's going on or what the person has seen. But you can also reach out to our local law enforcement, and they can also do a welfare check and just lay eyes on the person and just say, assess them, and everything okay. And you can also remain anonymous as well. So if anyone's worried about, things coming back, you do have that option as well.
I'd like to come back to you, Michelle, to talk about the individuals who are doing okay during this time. You had mentioned sort of, I don't remember if you phrased it as the village or the community, but like the network that we have at times, and maybe it slipped away a bit this year. But for those individuals who feel like they're coping with all of this well, they're doing okay, they're getting through it, what can they do for others beyond, noticing this particular friend might need some care? What are some suggestions that you might have for individuals to get out and help their community?
I think some of what Ashlyn just said is absolutely key. I mean, it's making those calls, it's making those texts, it's sending that Facebook post, it's making sure that we pull together a group. Happened to be, one of my friends had a birthday. And so she was turning 45. And so she made it a point that she brought together women, and we, she told everybody to get a charcuterie tray, and, to dress up and to find a cute place in your house. And And so we all were able to look at everybody's stuff, and we were able to have this conversation. And so there was a piece in which, of course, you would love to be together, but you know that that's not possible right now. And so the whole piece of being able to just do that and to really just pour into each other, I think that's what becomes important. I think it's, you know, those organizations that you're a part of, making sure that you go to those meetings, making sure that you participate in those things. I'm a part of Wichita Professional Communicators. We just had our meeting, and one of the things we decided to do was play virtual bingo. It took a little bit for everybody to figure it out, but once we got going, it was a blast. And so it's really just thinking about, you know, if I'm feeling good, how do I make sure that my friends are feeling good, making sure that I'm pouring into them, making sure that I'm doing things, going back to that self-care that we were talking about, making sure that I'm getting poured into, but I'm also pouring that out. I mean, as we're a river, then we always, you know, if we're putting out, we're attracting. And so it's that law of reciprocity. And so if I give out good things are going to come to me. And so when I'm feeling good, those are the things that we really want to do. And, you know, it's a great thing. And we were talking about before we got on that, you know, my little doggy had to go to the vet. But I think, you know, having pets, and sometimes that is the thing that gives people purpose, to get out of the bed, to have something to do, to have something to talk to. Because, you know, whether your dog talks back to you or not, it's a great way to get some stuff out of your head and out of your system. And so I know for me, having my dog during the pandemic was one of the best things. And she was loving me up and I was loving her up. And so I think, you know, being able to pour ourselves into some of those things. I know it's kind of cold now, but, you know, before, you know, being able to get into the garden and doing some of those things. And so I think those are the things that we do to kind of help. Again, going back, I think Ashlyn talked about self-care. You know, making sure that we do our nails, making sure that we put on clothes every day, making sure that we put on makeup. It's not a bad thing, even if you're not going anywhere, you know, to look nice, to make yourself, because those are things that build you and build that love for yourself.
So Hilary, a lot of parents and grandparents are hoping that you can offer guidance on how to support and nurture their kids in this hopefully once in a lifetime pandemic holiday. What would you suggest that adults do for children at this time?
I think probably the biggest thing is finding ways to be together in a new and different way. Teaching our kids that we can do this, we can make it through, we can do things differently, and it's going to be okay. And like I'd said before, like we need to not just gloss over the fact that, or ignore the fact that things are different and that they may have feelings about that. We need to give them the opportunity to express those feelings, to talk about that, to acknowledge what is different. And then let's start some new traditions. Let's do something different. We didn't used to have, you know, we used to have this type of a meal at this type of event, but let's switch it up. Let's do something different. You know, let's spend as much time outside as we can. You know, it's snowing today. Did anybody get a chance to go outside and catch snowflakes in their hands and watch them melt? You know, like how can we turn everything into a fun learning opportunity? Or, I mean, maybe we're not learning anything, but we are building social connections, those pathways in our brain that create those positive feelings. We can do lots of new and different things together. We can do those virtual games. We can spend time with our pets, like we've talked about. We can, you know, we just ordered new little sweaters for our pets, and they don't normally wear them, but they look so cute and they bring so much joy to us. Like, you know, we're so excited, you know, you look so cute. And, you know, then they wag and they're excited and we're excited. And, you know, it's just something new and different and fun. And, you know, what can we do with our children to build memories? That's what, you know, and I think I'm listening to everybody talk about our older population, and what they tell us all the time is, I don't necessarily need things, but I love to spend time together. Please spend time with me. So they thrive on memories. Their biggest gift is memories. So what can we do to celebrate the memories that we've already had and to make new ones? There are lots of creative ways to do that.
Well, and when you mentioned the snow, you kind of triggered a thought for me that maybe being, at least for self-care, in terms of the senses, the five senses, and dedicating a moment for these different senses to get into the kitchen and make something delicious, something different, or to go and feel those snowflakes landing on your fingertips.
Right.
I think one of the things that we don't think about is that we think about learning in a box. And so if you, just like you said, so we go into the kitchen and we make something good, we can talk about fractions. How much would it be if we double this fraction? And I think sometimes we take learning and we make it so sterile and so industrial, when we really could use every opportunity around us to teach our kids, to teach, what is happening now. Have you noticed at what time does it start to get dark? Let's start to keep a log, because it gets dark a little bit earlier and a little bit earlier and a little bit earlier. So what time is it getting dark now? It's various things like that don't necessarily seem like learning opportunities, but they are if we take them and we utilize them in ways that help to expand our kids' imagination. One of the things that I have really noticed is a lot of the kids are having issues because their imaginations are not as wide as some of ours, because we used to have to go outside and play, and we would have to imagine stuff and we'd have to create stuff. Well, these kids, a lot of their stuff comes already pre-packaged, pre-boxed. It comes in a game. And so they're so used to that they don't really have to think outside of the box. They don't really have to think creatively. And so I think this is a great opportunity to go back to some of that creativity and really teaching them how to think about and how to really engage in creative thinking.
And I would add to that also really helps to engage and connect what they're learning to the real world, right? I think they're doing it now, but when I was in high school, I was a weird kid, but I was like, it'd be so cool if I could learn about taxes and loans and like things that prepare me for the real world, right? They've got more of that now. But even on a smaller scale, like you were talking about, Michelle, fractions or time and, the day-night cycle. I mean, there are so many learning opportunities that are sometimes kind of small things that we just go on autopilot and forget about. But there are also great ways to reinforce that information that they're learning and to help connect it to everyday life around them so that they stay engaged and go, yeah, what I'm learning makes sense around me too. And so that's another thing for people with kiddos as well.
So using the world around us, whether that's just a house and a yard or whatever it is right now, for learning opportunities and for self-care. So we're using whatever we've got for those different things. But then I'm tempted to let's do a little lightning round here. If it comes to socializing through Zoom or something like that, let's say we've just got to do it. What would each of you suggest, the one game that you want to play, the one fun moment before you get down to business or do whatever other thing you're there to do? What are you going to do to break the ice and have fun right at the beginning? Ashlyn.
Oh gosh, well, something that my coworkers and I have done before, and we need to do it again, is sometimes, like this is what we'll do at the end of the day. We'll have like just a light cocktail hour, right? And so we just get together, we get into our comfy clothes, we grab a drink, and we just talk about, oh my gosh, how was the week? How was the day? How was everybody's, cases or mental health today? And then we just also just talk about real life too and validate each other's, yeah, I'm feeling that too. But it's just a really nice, safe place. So maybe not quite a game, but definitely having a fun little time where maybe you say, all right, I'm gonna get the girls together, I'm gonna get the guys together, and have a time where it's like, for this hour, it's a safe place and we're just here to talk and reminisce and dream, whatever that looks like. So that's what I would recommend.
Michelle, what would be your game of recommendation?
Well, so kind of along with that, we kind of do we do what's called cerro bona circles, which it's a Swahili word for I see you. And so one of the things that always happens is that is that we always begin with a dance party and we end with a dance party.
Ooh.
So, all of us are not necessarily dancers, but by having that music, it's just that ability to be able to be free. It's that ability to just kind of be silly for a moment and not have to worry about it and not have to, have your inhibitions totally removed from there. And so it's just being able to kind of have that little dance party, with some music that'll make you move. It's always a great way to do that.
Eric.
I'm a big fan because you can do it with people of any age, since we've been talking about people of different ages, is getting started off with something like, tell me what's the best thing that happened today, or what's the best thing that happened this week, or, what's the top of your to-do list for tomorrow, kind of trying to think about what's my goal and kind of getting centered, but sharing that with other people as well. Depending on the type of group you have, it may be a situation where you're aiming for something that someone else can help you with. There's this client I've been really trying to get in front of. No way, I know that person. Oh, well, let me help. So, depending on the age group and the type of group, I think those kind of what's the best thing or what's your goal, I think that's a great way to start or end a meeting.
Hilary?
I love all of that. But I think the best thing for me, the most fun thing for me is to laugh. I mean, we love to laugh, and laughter builds camaraderie and our happy feelings. And so let's tell jokes, the corny jokes, and kids, of all ages can participate in that and enjoy themselves and have a good time.
Thank you. Those were great. Now, to kind of wrap up the conversation this evening, I would like to ask each of you to respond to this as well. Basically, with so many people who are looking for hope and cheer that they would normally get from celebrating in a room with their family and friends, what tips do you have, just like your top couple of tips for helping to make this year special in spite of that lack of social interaction?
I would say communicate with your family. So the biggest thing is, if we have this time of conversation and we settle on what it is we want to do, whether that's, baking cookies together or eating dinner at the same time where, somebody, delivers and we are all eating at the same time, but it's just communicating. Because if we all know what we're going to do and we can all get on the same page, then being able to, whether it's by Zoom or whether it's sitting in the same room, physically distanced, because I don't like the word social distance, physically distanced, but socially connected, then, we can be good, but we just have to communicate whatever that looks like.
I would say that, I would add to that in that just give yourself a break. I think we're so used to going on autopilot. We're so used to needing to be happy all the time or needing to be performing good all the time. And sometimes we just need to remember that, hey, we're human, right? And it's okay to take a breath. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to pat yourself on the back. And so like with a lot of my students, I tell them, talk about, get together with some friends. Well, maybe not together physically, but, text your friends or FaceTime them and talk to them about what your plans are, right? Kind of getting excited and planning for the future in the sense of, man, I can't wait for winter break and I'm going to be able to sleep in, or I can't wait. I'm going to video with my family, and kind of just sharing those happy moments, sharing that gratitude, and just really giving yourself a break and saying, things are tough, but it's okay, right? It's okay to not be okay. And so sometimes we just need to give ourselves that break, give ourselves that grace to just maybe relax and do nothing for just a little bit. Like that's okay too. Especially communicate, because if anybody's coordinated anything, it can be very difficult sometimes to get everybody on the same page. But communicating, giving yourself a break, that self-care, and, just remembering that, yes, things are different, but they won't be like this forever. And this is a great way to practice and remind yourself of your strength and your resiliency, during this time. You know, we're all in this together. We're all trying our best. And there's so many different people that you can turn to as well for support. So don't ever feel like you're alone in it.
I would say let's be careful of our expectations. Let's not put expectations for this year's situation and compare them to last year. Let's just work on the situation that we're in and not have too high expectations for ourselves. Like Ashlyn said, let's just kind of cut ourselves a break and allow for some grace. And also remember that what's right for me and my family may not be right for someone else's family, and understanding that and without judgment, that, you know, if I don't feel comfortable going to a particular event, then I would want someone to extend me some grace and understanding that that's just the choice that I'm making right now, and I need to do the same thing for them.
And I guess I would kind of go in the way of an activity that I think would be a really fun way to finish the year. I saw this done once and I thought it was great. Sit down and make a list of maybe a half a dozen people that you have not talked to in a long time. Maybe people you went to school with and lost touch with. Maybe people from 5 jobs ago that you really loved, and then you changed jobs and you haven't talked to them since. Write out a note or a Christmas card, or send them a text, or find them on Facebook and send them a note and just say, hey, you know, I realize we haven't talked for 13 years or whatever it is, but that thing you said to me when I worked at that job with you really stuck with me. Or, you know, I remember some really good times we had back in college. I know we've lost touch, but I wanted to let you know that I still think about that. Just 2 or 3 sentences, but a really genuine, heartfelt note, however it's best to communicate them with that person, and find them and get that note to them. What a fantastic way to finish out a year, by remembering that, man, this offhand comment I said to this person across the cubicle wall 13 years ago stuck with them, and they just let me know that. How amazing is that? I think that'd be a great way to finish a year. I think if everybody did that, think how many of those notes we would all get.
Those are some beautiful ideas and tips. Thank you all so much. I think we will conclude our conversation with that. Thank you again for joining the panel today. And to all of you, I hope you have gotten some valuable information this evening. This Digital Democracy on Tap conversation has been sponsored by Susan and Leon Mader of Mader & Associates. I'm Sarah Jane Crespo. Thanks for joining us, and tell your family and friends that they can watch this conversation on our website under the Events tab at Engage ICT or at engageict.org. Thanks again. Please make the most of your holiday at home, and good night.